month, Dr. Joanie King, who joined us fairly recently, I guess, as 3 years ago. Oh my gosh, fairly recently to someone like me who's been here way, way too long. So she's our extension entomologist. Also, my very long-term colleague, Dr. Rebecca Kramer, who has gotten many disease plants out of my chili fields over the years and has done a wonderful job really working and researching curly top virus, which of course is a really serious disease of Chile here in New Mexico. So with that, Dr. King, I'll let you take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, let's see if I get this on right. Can y'all hear me in Zoom land? Okay, so we're going to talk about some chili pepper arthropod pests, I guess insects. These are all insects that I'm going to talk about, and their management. So these aren't all the pests that you could possibly see, but they're some of the more common ones, right? Because we have 30 minutes or so to go over this. So an overview of this talk, I'm going to kind of frame this, or I am going to frame this within the vein of integrated pest management, IPM, and provide some definitions. And then I'll show some photos of some beneficial insects that you would see in a chili field, or in chili pepper. And then I'll go over identification, damage, and management of some early season pests and some post-bloom pests. Is there a way to mute the ding-dongs or... Sorry, it's distracting, but sorry, guys. All right, so this is an overview of the talk. So what is IPM? Simply put, it's this approach to pest management that uses cultural, physical, biological, and chemicals to help suppress pests. And the goal of it is to limit economic and environmental health risks, right? Limit those. An example of IPM, you have aphids in a greenhouse and you release some parasitoid wasps to help reduce those aphid populations down. So there's some key steps to IPM. I just taught a master gardener class and on Friday in El Paso, or Thursday of last week. It all bleeds together at this point. But so my colleague, Dr. Beck, she first and talked about labels and how they're really important. So I taught them about identification, right? Because identification is the most important step when it comes to IPM. But they were like, read the label. And yes, reading the label is super important. But before we get to chemicals, right, we want to utilize some steps to try to help reduce pest populations. So prevention's key, right? So identification and prevention kind of go hand in hand, right? You got to know what's out there, what you're dealing with, but also preventing. Monitoring, and then there's thresholds, and then you'll finally choose the appropriate management with these different IPM strategies. So going into prevention, basically, stress plants are less suitable to pest pressures. They just are. Research shows things like aphids, they actually can target in on stress plants, right? Insects are very chemical. They can smell that, they can sense that. So keeping plants healthy is really important, using the appropriate amounts of water and fertilizer. And, in some cases, too much nitrogen can attract insects, right? But if you don't have enough, they're not healthy. Selecting the correct plants for your landscape, right? This has all sorts of different requirements like soil moisture needs, light levels, all that sort of things. But preventing doesn't always work, right? There's lots of things that go on. So in these environments, right, I like to say that we're ecologists, and ecology isn't rocket science. It's harder, right? It's very complex and messy. So prevention doesn't always work. So knowing your pests and identification is extremely important. So surveying, regularly inspecting plants for damage and pests, right, and or pests, inspecting the plants. If you do observe damage, identify the cause. So there's lots of different reasons that plants show these different symptoms, right? It might not just be from insects. It could be sun scalds, bacterial, a lot of different factors, right? So like learning those. There are also things like abiotic stress from chemical drift or heat stress. So a lot of the things that get sent to me as the extension entomologist for the plant diagnostics clinic I sometimes just see stress plants that don't have any insects on them at all, right? So that is something to think about. And then once you're learning more about the damage, noticing what part of the plant is being attacked. Some insects prefer the undersides of the leaves, some the terminals, right? So like inspecting the different parts. And then if you do see an insect, which part is being damaged? Sometimes insects are feeding nocturnally and not during the day. So learning the different signs of damage, and we're going to talk about not all of these because we're talking about chili pepper, right? But the most important things are chewing, mining, piercing, sucking, right? That's a lot of the types of insect pests that we're dealing with. But insects do change plants in different ways or from their feeding, right? Like this is called cat facing. That's from a stink bug. But in addition to feeding damage, some insects can vector viruses and other pathogens, which Dr. Creamer will talk about later and I'll talk about slightly. So monitoring is super important. It's really key to notice insects before they really boom in their populations, right? And then you really have a big problem. So there's a variety of ways to sample, and this can depend on your pest, but sticky cards are a really good way to passively visualize what insects you might have in your field, like beet leafhopper or thrips. Sweep netting, that's more active, but you can see not only what pests you have, but maybe some beneficials. And then, these are usually the ones that visually counting, right? Seeing the damage that has been done or the number of the pests that are on there. So there's other ways to monitor for insects, but a lot of these pests that I'm going to talk about, these are the most utilized methods. So this is the IPM triangle. This is something that I use to talk about using these different strategies once you do notice pests, right? So you're basically starting with the most preventative, and then you're intervening with insecticides. So starting off with cultural controls, right? Removing debris, removing weeds, like mustard weeds for the case of the beet leafhopper, physical, mechanical, things like row covers, biological. So there's nuance to this, I'll go into that. And then finally, chemicals, and even with chemicals, the big guns are your broad spectrum insecticides. So if you can avoid using those, that's best, because sometimes if you overuse those, then you get outbreaks of other pests. So just these definitions and some examples. Cultural, the idea of this is that you're making the environment less suitable for your pests, keeping your plants healthy, reducing or removing pest habitat, planting flowering cover crops, which can help provide habitat for beneficial insects, but also improve soil health and floral resources. Physical, mechanical, this is the idea you're basically using equipment to exclude or remove pests, right, physically. So some examples, using a strong stream of water to dislodge aphids, habitat manipulation like mulching, traps, and row covers, right? So these are ways that you're excluding your pests. And then biological control, this one is my personal favorite. This is the idea of which the enemy of your enemy is your friend, right? So we have these natural enemies. And within biological control, we have different types, right? We got classical, augmentative, and conservation. What we're going to utilize on a regular basis would be augmentative or conservation. Classical biological control isn't something that we do every day as growers or gardeners, right? This is the idea that you have an invasive species and then you go to the native range of said species and you find some natural enemies like a parasitoid wasp, right, to help with that particular pest species. Whereas augmentative is the idea where you're purchasing or you're releasing, you rear natural enemies, and you have the goal to reduce the population. So there's inundative and inoculative. Inundative is that classical way of like purchasing lady beetles, right, to help reduce like something like aphid populations. But once they consume those aphids, they move on, right? They're not going to stay there. They're going to go somewhere else where they have food. Where inoculative, the idea of this is to have smaller releases and the goal to establish a particular natural enemy, maybe something like minute pirate bugs. And then conservation is what I really like, and that is boosting your habitat or your area to actually enhance the habitat to sustain your beneficial insects. So I'm going to talk about some of these beneficial insects that feed on a variety of pests before we get into the pests. So one that I see quite often are damsel bugs. These guys are really small, so they're feeding on smaller pests like aphids or thrips or early instars of cutworms. These guys are piercing, sucking insects, but they're predators, right? They're feeding on pests. They have these, they're not this big, they're pretty small. They're about 3/8 an inch long, but they have these wings that extend past the tip of their abdomen. They're pretty skinny looking and kind of drab in their color, but they got strong forelegs for catching their prey. And then we have big-eyed bugs. So these guys aren't really this big. Has anyone seen a whitefly before in here at all? Yeah, so these are whitefly nymphs. It's a very tiny insect. So these guys are about 1/16 an inch long, and that's on the larger the end. But even though they're tiny, they're pretty characteristic looking because they have these big, bulging, alien-like eyes. They're almost touching like their thorax. So these guys are feeding, like the nabids, they're feeding on a variety of soft-bodied insects and small little insects. And they can vary in their color, but the ones that I tend to see are like brown and black. All right, now my new pirate bugs. These guys, and Vince had mentioned, sometimes the beneficials bite me. And yes, sometimes they can, because they are very ravenous. They are looking for prey to eat, and this is a really great example of one of our good guys that just eats a lot of little pesky insects. So this is a minute pirate bug, or Anthracoridae is the family, Aureus is the species, or the genus name. So these guys are really tiny. You can see here in this photo I took, this is a petri dish, really small little guys, but even with the naked eye, you can make out some of these details. They look like they have an X on their back. They're white and they're black. Here's one I took on a milkweed leaf right there. And then I was really excited about this photo here because you can see their piercing, sucking mouth parts, right? That's what they feed on their prey with. And yeah, these guys, really small, but they can have a really good impact on like reducing some of those pesky insects like thrips and aphids. And then lacewings, green lacewings. So I haven't seen too many brown lacewings here out in the field. They do occur in New Mexico, but the ones that I see are more so species of green lacewings. So these guys are insects that go through complete metamorphosis, and the larva stage of this insect right here is the one that's feeding a lot. And their pupa look like little, like almost like spider eggs or something. So sometimes I've had people send those in like, what is that? Like, I should add a photo of that, but they are the pupa of that. They're eggs, so you oftentimes can see them on the undersides of leaves. They are extremely ravenous, so much so that their eggs are like that, so that when they hatch, they don't eat their siblings. It also helps protect them from predation. So these are really great, and these ones occur naturally, and you can purchase these for augmentative biological control. But for conservation biological control, there are a variety of plants that you can plant in and around fields. Insectary plants, there's a whole list of them that we have available, and this is something that I'm interested in learning more on, like what can attract, feed, and sustain these beneficial insects for enhancing biological control, because they need a place to live, they need energy, right? And if they aren't present, it takes a while for those pests, for those predator populations to build up to help reduce those pests. And then finally, yes, chemicals. They are part of IPM. IPM isn't the absence of chemicals, but using them smartly. So avoiding broad spectrum insecticides when possible. Spraying, in the evening, avoid spraying when windy. Really hard to do in New Mexico, but it's there. Avoid spraying while flowers are in bloom. And now a lot of these labels, they have a lot of these pollinator protection statements that are on there. So make sure that you're aware of that and you do your research before you schedule an application. So let's go ahead and get into these pests. So I'm going to talk about some early season pests first. First one up, darkling beetles. These are tenebrionids. There are two different genera of them. These guys are more so problematic in the Pecos Valley. They are beetles, little beetles. They get up to the adults about 1/4 of an inch long. They're kind of drab in their colors. They're brownish, grayish, blackish. They have chewing mouth parts. The larvae look kind of like these like wire worms, right? They're kind of cream colored, and they're longer than the adult insect. They can get about 3/4 an inch long. And it is important to note that there is a beneficial ground beetle that will eat these guys that looks superficially similar to them, these carabids, but these ones aren't going to be feeding on the plants, right? It's like they're going to be found searching for prey. So they're damaged. The adults feed on foliage, cutting seedlings from the base. The larvae feed on roots. Both feed at night, and their damage is most severe on field margins. And oh, I wrote that twice. Sorry, but yeah, that's where I guess it's really important, right? It's like the margins. When you see that, look for those guys. Look for the larvae. They are active at night. So they're not typically an issue unless large populations build up, right? So disking nearby weedy fields before planting may reduce their populations, especially if you've dealt with them before. But there are insecticides available, systemic soil applied or follicular insecticides labeled for these guys. And spot treatment in the field may provide satisfactory results. And again, always read the label with these, but this is how these guys are handled. So it's cultural and chemical typically, if the natural enemies aren't helping keeping their populations down. Moving along, so you may learn more about these than what I'm going to tell you today, but to like prime us and get us started off, the beet leafhopper. So this is a piercing sucking insect, and these guys are pretty small. They are wedge shaped. I don't know how to remove that, but anyway, they vary in their color, but they tend to be green, greenish yellow, brownish, kind of pale in color. They do jump. They have, I don't know how well you can see it in any of these photos, but rows of spikes on their legs. They go through incomplete metamorphosis. So these are the nymphs of the adults, right? This is before they have their wings. So they can jump, they can fly. And yeah, piercing, sucking insects. And because they pierce and suck, they have the ability to vector some viruses like curly top virus. So, but also they're feeding, you can see this stippling, and it can lead to yellowing, curling of foliage, poor quality and plant death, in addition to their ability to vector the virus. And the thing about these guys is that their primary host isn't chili or other vegetables. They're going after mustards and other weeds. That's their primary host. So they're just traveling. So for these guys, managing them, it can be a little tough because they're just coming, they're going. So row covers, excluding them, monitoring for them, right? Yellow sticky cards. These are some things that can help, and also removing these mustard weeds in and around the field can help. And I'm sure you'll learn more about that momentarily. Moving along, thrips. So these guys, very teeny tiny insects, rice shaped. This is a photo I like to show folks for scale, like on how large they are, which they are not. They're very teeny tiny, right? So this is an iris petal here. These little tiny rice-shaped guys, these are all thrips on there, so they're very small. The larvae, sometimes the immatures are called larvae or nymphs, but the thrips larvae, they look like the adults without wings. They rasp and suck. That's how they feed. We have multiple species of these guys, but commonly I see things like the western flower thrips and onion thrips. Those are a lot of the ones that I see, but we do have other species. And something to note with thrips is that you need an adult to have species level identification. You cannot ID thrips just from nymphs or larvae. They have a weird developmental cycle, but we don't have time to get into that today. All right, damage by thrips. So problematic. They're feeding, they'll feed on the terminal and buds of chili plants. They cause leaves to distort and wrinkle, leading to like this discoloration and browning of leaf edges. And unfortunately, these guys also can vector this tomato spot wilt virus, and it's really frustrating because there's no cure for sick plants. So you have to destroy those plants, and you can't compost them or anything like that. You just have to remove them, and you know, it's a pretty yucky thing. Sorry, that's not very scientific, but it's not a good thing to have. So managing thrips, unfortunately, hard. Managing thrips is really tough. I don't have any silver bullets for this. It's a variety of keeping up on different IPM strategies, and hopefully, you know, we can learn some more about this, but it is tough, and especially with the overuse of broad spectrum insecticides, you can get spider bites, you know, when dealing with like thrips. But anyway, so avoiding broad spectrum insecticides can help a lot. Trying to use more selective and less toxic ones. Cultural controls, removing old debris from the previous season, removing weeds from around the chili plants. Physical controls, row covers for young plants, and there's some somewhat recent research showing the effectiveness of reflective mulch. So reflective mulch, the idea of this is that it interferes with the thrip's ability to find the plant, right? Because they visually find them, so it kind of interferes. Well, it interferes with that. Silver or gray have been found to be most effective. So it's like this shiny, like, you know, artificial mulch. It's best used for plants that are initially pest-free, right, that do not have thrips. And the plants are small in comparison with the surface area. So as plants grow larger and larger, it's less effective in being useful for thrips, being able to, you know, to prevent them from locating them. So biocontrol, there are things that like to eat them, like green lacewings, minute pirate bugs, predatory thrips, predatory mites, and parasitic wasps. So that's why it's avoiding those broad spectrum insecticides, because these guys really do help with keeping their pest population down. So moving along, some post-bloom pests. One that really sucks, aphids. And they do because they're piercing sucking, right? So we have numerous species. I've seen a variety of these, but one of the more common species that you'll see are the green peach aphids. So that's the primary pests that we see, but there are others. So these guys are really small insects, depending on the species, you know, 1/16 an inch long, really teeny tiny, not as small as thrips, but, you know, still pretty small. Yeah, piercing sucking mouth parts. They can vary in their color. Green peach aphids are pale green, but the winged forms, right, they're kind of darker in their color and they have wings. So they do have incomplete development, but the adults don't always have wings with aphids. It has to do with seasonality and trying to locate. They'll have winged forms to migrate onto, disperse to another host plant. So aphids, they're feeding in addition to having the ability to transmit viruses like some of these other piercing sucking insects like the potato Y virus. These guys produce honeydew. So it's really this sticky mess, right? So aphids, because of their feeding and how much they're feeding, they excrete this honeydew to keep their body in regulation. So like imagine you have a fire hydrant, you're like drinking from it, you're gonna need to excrete water, right, to have that pressure. So they have this honeydew. Ants love it. Sometimes they'll protect them and tend to them. And then you also get sooty mold, like this black mold growth because of that sticky mess. But also their feeding, it leads to distorted and curled leaves, right? So sticky, distorted, curled leaves, just really gross. So managing aphids, thankfully, there are a couple of things you can do to help manage them. Row covers are useful. Always check underneath row covers regularly to make sure you don't have some other pests in there. Insecticides are available. However, a lot of these are highly toxic to your beneficial insects. So there are some less toxic options like neem oil, insecticidal soaps. And, you know, do keep in mind these are contact insecticides and they only kill aphids when they come into contact with them. So apply to both sides of the leaves, but always read the label, right? That'll let you know. But thankfully, these little honeydew packets, a lot of things love to eat them. So they have a lot of natural enemies. So these are the guys that you're protecting. So you talked about the big-eyed bugs, the minute pirate bugs. We have parasitoid wasps. So these are little mummies here, right? These have turned into the pupal cases for these parasitoid wasps that have eaten the insides of the aphids. We have hoverflies, which we've seen a bunch of those over, by your area. Lady beetles, green lacewing larvae, and there's some other natural enemies as well. So a lot of things love to eat aphids. Moving along, pepper weevil. So this is a beetle. So they have complete metamorphosis. These are small little beetles, so about 1/18 an inch long or 3 millimeters. They vary in their color, but they're like brownish. They have these rostrums, right? So that's actually its mouth. The mouth is at the end of that. It's not a nose or anything. Their nose are their antennae, right? That's how they smell. Eggs, these are not easy to see, but there's the detail there. Larvae, C-shaped, grubby-like guys. And then the pupa, you can find those. They're found inside the pods or buds. So you're not really going to see those. You're going to be seeing, I don't put that picture there. There's like one of the pepper weevil emerging from the pepper, but here's the pupa and the larva from inside the pepper. Some more photos. So these guys, they feed on fruit and leaf buds. The larvae feed inside the pods, which can cause the young fruit to drop. For these guys, monitoring is really important, but cultural controls work best. So preventing outbreaks of these guys. So there's a couple of things you can do for that. Inspecting, monitoring, right? Avoiding areas that have had those infestations of those. Avoid rotating to crops like solanaceous crops, tomatoes, because they love those. They'll feed on those as well. So controlling those solanaceous weeds can be very important for these guys. So field sanitation is extremely important for pepper weevil. Removing dropped fruit from the fields, shedding and disking pepper plant residue, controlling the solanaceous weeds. Those are really like the top ones. There are some natural enemies, but they're not as effective as for some of these other pests that we have. And there are insecticides available if necessary, if these things do not work for the pepper weevils. So the last but not least, leaf miner fly. So there's a variety of insects that can be leaf miner, but a lot of the ones that we're dealing with these are these flies. These are Agrobasidae. So this refers, like the leaf miner refers to the action of them mining into the leaf. So here's the adult fly. They're little small guys, and the larva. So with these, they're typically not a problem economically, right? Economic leaf miner infestations are rare. This is more common in a greenhouse. Many leaves may exhibit sub-economic levels of leaf miner, so you'll see some of that leaf mining action, but where it's really problematic is when you have a lot of them and a lot of leaves are dropping. So how they're controlled, typically biocontrol, especially in fields, like there's parasitic wasp and other beneficials. And there are insecticides available, but they are quite toxic. And neem oil can be somewhat effective, but not always. So with that, learn to ID your bugs. I like Bug Guide as a source, but if you're still unsure, extension services like Jeff, myself, will always help you ID a bug. I always love to look at a bug, whether it's a good bug or a bad bug. It's always fun. Makes my day. With that, I'll take any questions. All right. Yes. So you can bug me. There's no questions. We're good. Yes. Okay. Tenebrionidae?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 2 different genera. Yeah, I'll put them here so you can. I'm bad at spelling things, so I will let you. Oh, it is. That's lagging behind me. That is so funny. There it is. Bastistinus and Coleus. Those are the 2 different genera. I've seen more commonly this guy, but they both occur.
It's also wireworms. Right?
Yeah, wireworms, exactly. Yeah, that refers to the larval stage of them. Yeah.
So if I want to get public refrigeration, the wireworm, they're actually putting holes in the low mill.
Oh no.
So I think that you might remember that one, Vince.
That's like that. Not. It's like they're not only feeding on there, but they're like causing damage to the. Yeah. Yes.
Effective is that really? What is it effective against?
Right.
And how would you use it to be effective?
Right. So it depends on the pest, right? And it basically is excluding, even though it is technically like we define it as like a chemical, right? But it's so it's a desiccant, it dries them out, it cuts their bodies up, and it only works if it's dry. Once it becomes wet, it does not work any longer. What I find that to be effective against is things like cutworms and squash bug, but it's, you know, it's one of those things where you constantly have to be putting out new stuff because like if you're watering right after, it's not going to be effective.
If you're using it against squash bugs, you want to sprinkle it on the plants or around them?
Around them, yeah.
But yeah, keep it dry. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
I know that is hard, right? But at least in New Mexico, like it's not as bad, right? It's not raining like nonstop, like Florida or something like that. So it can be effective, but it's not an end all be all type solution, but it can be one that can be effective for certain pests. It's one of them, yeah. Oh, squash bugs. Yes.
Do you ever use spiders as beneficial?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. And spiders are beneficials. You know, I don't have time to go over everything, but in mostly dedicated biological control beneficials, I would have spiders listed as a good natural enemy. And we have a bunch of them like crab spiders, and we took some spider photos from your field as well. So they are one of our beneficial natural enemies for sure. Like all spiders are pretty good when it comes to being predators in fields. So good guys, yes. Great question, because I did not talk about spiders. All right.
Next question. Okay, let's have another hand for Dr.
Thanks,
King.
y'all. Now, I guess I should get this stuff to you. Do you want to use my laptop or are you going to use yours? Oh, she's,
I think they want me to use mine.
okay.
There
you go. And here you go. And stop share.
Do you want me to
Mhm.
use? Or
I'm going to leave the Zoom.
You're just mute for a second.
What's that?
You're just mute for a second.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just thinking.
You have, okay, you have.
Yeah, your microphone.
Look me your shoulder, Bobby.
Want me to, I'm gonna have to, yeah, hold on. I've got to go back to me. Here, hold on. Let me stop sharing. I need to. Okay, now,
Yeah.
perfect. I had to find me again.
Is that going to work out okay?
That's
easy,
Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. Some aphids are really tiny. All right, I am going to talk about some viruses of Chile and their management. And I've already been introduced, and I know a bunch of you already. It's not like I haven't been around here forever. Jeff? All right. Not telling you anything you didn't already know, but plant viruses make a huge impact on pepper production pretty much worldwide. I don't think there's any place in the world that plant viruses don't really mess up pepper production. There's been a large number of viruses that have been reported on pepper, more than 100. How important a particular virus is to peppers depends on how it's transmitted, how severe the symptoms are, what diagnostic tools are available to even identify it, how easy it is to manage, where it is, and then how much it's usually found mixed. Sometimes one virus is not bad, but mixed, it becomes a big problem. In New Mexico, these are the viruses that I found. So beet curly top virus, there's a variety of potiviruses, cucumber mosaic virus, which is shown here, alfalfa mosaic virus, tomato spotted wilt virus. A lot of these are often found in mixed infections. That is, you find one virus, you're likely to find 3 because they're all transferred by the lovely aphids, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And they're not all found every year. Some years you can find one virus, some years you find another, some years you find 4 of them mixed together, but they're sporadic. Because this is the perfect intro, so we are going right ahead with what are doing the transmitting. And so the ones that we have here, alfalfa mosaic can be transmitted mechanically. That is, if you mow alfalfa, if you mow chili, and it's not very often, but sometimes you're going to mow to regrow it, help improve something. It can be transferred. Otherwise, they're transferred by aphids. So alfalfa mosaic will be transferred by aphids, cucumber mosaic, and all those potiviruses. And that's in a non-persistent manner. What that means is the aphid only needs to feed like 30 seconds to a minute on an infected plant to pick it up. It can feed on a healthy plant and get rid of it in 30 seconds to a minute. Really, really fast. What that means is insecticides are probably not going to work. It won't kill it fast enough. It can transfer the virus. So that's why it's really important to know how they're transmitted as well, the manner. Beet leafhopper here. So this is not green peach aphid, but I'll come back to the correct picture. This is just one that I've worked on. Beet leafhopper is transmitting beet curly top virus. It does that in a persistent circulative fashion, which means it feeds on an infected plant, which will not be chili or tomatoes. Let's say it's a weed, which it much prefers. So it feeds on that. It takes the virus in. It moves through the gut wall into the hemolymph, moves around, and when it gets to the salivary glands, then it spits it back out. That whole process takes a while. That's circulating. So it might take an hour for them to be feeding nicely into the vascular system to pick it up, and a couple more hours for it to move all the way through back to the salivary glands, and then to be spit back into the plant, which means there's a length of time in there. So that means that it's not instantaneous. So it will take hours for it to be able to transfer. The other are thrips. Those thrips transfer tomato spotted wilt in a persistent propagative manner. What that means is when young immature thrips feed on an infected plant, they will take up the virus,
the virus moves through and starts to infect different parts of the thrips. So it's replicating inside of the thrips, and it will be there forever. It has to be a young thrips that picks it up. Old thrips or more mature thrips can't, because of the really convoluted way in which the virus has to move all the way through. It can't do it except for younger thrips. But if younger thrips feeds on an infected plant, the virus can move in, can start to replicate. Once it gets to the salivary glands, it can spit it into the plant. But it then can transfer the virus for its entire life because there's always making more virus within it. All right, so I'm going to talk about some of the specific viruses. Here's alfalfa mosaic virus. Alfalfa mosaic virus is moved around by a lot of different aphids. Remember, this is the non-persistent, so very fast to pick it up and get and transfer it. Alfalfa mosaic is found worldwide. It hits a lot of plants. Peppers are one, but it'll go to alfalfa, and it goes to many, many, many different host plants, a lot of weeds as well. On peppers, it forms almost a white mosaic. It also causes stunting and some fruit distortion. And there is no resistance to alfalfa mosaic in peppers. Really, what you're left with is planting this far away from sources. That is, don't plant your chili right next to an alfalfa field. Chances are you're only going to get it on the plants that are closest to the alfalfa field, but moving it slightly further away will fix the problem. And the other thing is, don't mow your chili field. Because this is moved mechanically, because there's a lot of virus in the epidermal layers, if you mow, and the reason people mow is, let's say you had hail damage. That's one reason I've seen people that you had hail damage and go, oh, well, we're just going to start over again. We'll just mow it down and let it resprout. It'll be fine. Or you're trying to pick a better market window, depending on what it is. If you had a small amount of alfalfa mosaic anywhere there, you've just mowed it into many, many, many more plants, and you can go from a few plants to taking over and infecting the entire field. Cucumber mosaic virus is also transmitted non-persistently to everybody. All right. Hello, Nick. To many aphids. It's transferred by many different types of aphids and also through seed. Causes a mild mosaic chlorosis of leaves. The largest losses will be to seedlings. It's going to lots of different, is there a problem? Look in the chat real fast. Okay, just wanted to make sure there wasn't a problem. Okay, this will cause mild mosaic and necrosis, worse for seedlings. This is going also to a lot of different plants other than just chili. It goes to many, many different crops and a whole lot of different weeds. There is some resistance or tolerance to some strains. There's a lot of strains of cucumber mosaic virus. Most of the resistance that's been found is in bell peppers. So that's when we talk about this, the resistance to most viruses that I'll talk about are all found in bell peppers. Almost none of this is in chili. What can you do with this? You can work on removing weed hosts, but they may not cause symptoms in the hosts, those weed hosts. You can change your planting date to avoid the vectors if you know when they're going to come in. You can use the reflective mulch. So aphids are fickle, and so they're going to land in and they're going to go, wait, where's the sky? So it reflects, and so they see it's blue. Oh, wait, I'm all messed up. Where do I go? And so the idea is that they won't land. Potyviruses. These are some of the potyviruses. So pepper mottle, tobacco etch, potato virus Y. These are all 3 ones that have been found in New Mexico. All together, I'm going to give you all together, and then we're going to split them out. They will cause mosaic or mottle. They cause stunting or reduced fruit set, malformed fruit. High yield loss if the plants are infected young. Generally, these are not seed transmitted. Some potyviruses are, but these are not. These are also transferred by aphids in that non-persistent fashion, means very quickly. They generally go to solanaceous crops and weed hosts. And once again, there is some plant resistance to tobacco etch and potato virus Y in bell pepper. So those aphid vectors, notice there's a whole lot of them. Here's the Mysis persicae. It is a generalist. It's willing to try and eat lots and lots of things. Apis cassipii, cotton melon aphids. So these are really fairly common aphids. Generally, the aphids that are going to be transferring virus are those that have the wings and don't want to eat that. So they are not colonizing. They are flying through, they taste it, they go, ooh, yuck, and then they fly on. Those are the ones that are transferring it. You're not going to get it from the ones without wings. They're just sitting there that like that. They don't transfer the non-persistent viruses very well because they just sit and eat it. And so instead of holding on to the virus and moving to the next plant, it just goes out the back end with the honeydew. All right, a little more about these. Pepper mottle virus. Pepper mottle virus is found throughout the Southwest, Mexico, Central America. It causes leaf mottling, distortions, some stunting, goes to solanaceous crops and weeds. Once again, there's a small amount of resistance in bell peppers. With this, back to those reflective mulches, because we're still talking about the aphids. Another thing that I've seen that has worked sort of okay is they call them stylet oils. It's a fine grade machine oil. And that the concept behind stylet oils is not that they clog the stylet, but that the aphids don't like the sticky, and so they groom. And if they're grooming, then they're not feeding. If you can add a little bit of insecticide to that mineral oil, it won't, the insecticide by itself will not stop them from transmitting. But if you add it to the mineral oil, then they're basically coating themselves with insecticide. They will die. It will take a while, but that way, because normally you have to come in contact with it. So basically you're allowing them to apply it like sunscreen. Potato virus Y, also global in scope, found many places throughout the world. Much worse on potatoes than it is on peppers, but it causes mosaic, mottling, some vein banding, necrosis, defoliation, some smaller fruit. Goes to a lot of solanaceous crops and weeds. There is resistance in bell peppers again. And with this one, generally, your best bet is to figure out what weeds they're in and just take them out. The difficulty is they go to so many different weeds. This makes it a lot more difficult. Roguing infected plants from the field is always an okay choice because they could potentially pick up from one plant and move to another, because remember, they only needed to feed for 30 seconds to get it. Tobacco etch virus, another potyvirus found throughout the Americas, leaf mottling, distortion, stunting. Here's that etching pattern here. It's going to cause, it goes to a lot of different things. it can overwinter in weeds and tomatoes. It will cause its largest losses to solanaceous crops. There's resistance in bell peppers. And here, once again, that reflective mulch, have them go elsewhere, and maybe mineral oil or those stylet oils to just keep them from feeding. So instead, they'll groom. We have seen in New Mexico mixtures. So here are just some of those combinations of virus in different years. And I've gone way back here. I wasn't here in 1993. That was vaguely historical, but I have been here for the rest of those. So it's often late season symptoms, and then there are combinations like cucumber mosaic virus and pepper mottle, or that with PVY, tobacco etch, and tomato spotted wilt, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So you can get all of these different combinations, and they show up, not every year, some years. The reason you're likely to get them in combinations is because if you've got Aphis gossypii, it could feed on a variety of those. Not so with tomato spotted wilt, but we'll come back to that in just a second. All right, a little bit more about those weeds. Here is silverleaf nightshade, but these are things that we have found those mosaic viruses on: field bindweed, Russian thistle, Jimson weed, ground cherry, hog potato. They may or may not, and the key here is probably mostly may not, show symptoms of that weed, on those weeds. The viruses there could be in. We have found and alfalfa mosaic you may or may not find in with everything else, but we have found a variety of those mosaic viruses. You can find them in perennial weeds. It's kind of a problem. So long ago, it was said that there was a 60 to 100% infection of cucumber mosaic virus and pepper mottle virus in some of those weeds. So just when it's been looked at, it's periodic, it's not every year. Some years are particularly bad. All right, tomato spotted wilt. This is persistently propagatively transferred in the thrips by the thrips vector. Tomato spotted wilt is found pretty much everywhere. It's a really big problem in greenhouses as well. Starting with clean stock, starting with clean plant,